couple of people waiting to get in too.
I let them in.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Commission work session for Thursday, November 3rd, 2022. I now call this work session to order. First order of business is determination of a quorum. We have 5 commissioners, therefore we do have a quorum. Moving along, adoption of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adopt this afternoon's agenda?
I'll motion to adopt the agenda. Blumenkron. I'll
And-
second it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And moving along to the work session. Go ahead and turn it over to Scott.
All right, thank you, Chair Seymour. Scott Woodford here. This is a work session on the development code amendments that we're proposing to bring to you guys on the 17th, and subject of many work sessions so far this year. These are all development code amendments that are associated with our housing plan update and the efficiency measures project that we've been working on. Also have with me Matt Hasty from MIG, our consultant. He's just going to kind of lay in wait for his opportunity to jump in for questions that I can't answer or observations that he might have or anything there. So he's there as a resource for us today. But just wanted to take this opportunity, knowing that we had this public hearing coming up, knowing that we've talked about a lot of things over the last year, but haven't had a chance to really focus in on the actual development code amendments that we want to bring forward to you guys on the 17th. So this is an opportunity to kind of dig a little deeper on those and make sure that you understand what's being proposed. And if you have any comments, we can make tweaks between now and the 17th. So the intention is just for me to go through this presentation, and there's, I think, more or less five different subjects that we're talking about. We'll kind of go through them one by one, and I'll kind of present, and I'll stop and see if you guys have any questions on any of them or comments. So the first one is, if you want to share the screen, maybe, so they can see the presentation. This proposal is to increase the allowed density in the multifamily residential zone. The reason for this change is based on some of the it's a strategy that communities are putting into place to get more infill, also to get more housing, hopefully that's of the more affordable variety. But it's also based on some of the stakeholder interviews that we did initially. If you guys will remember, at the beginning of this process with our housing plan, we did some stakeholder interviews with those kind of a variety of people around the community who are involved with housing and affordable housing to kind of get their thoughts. And some of the feedback we got from them were that market rate and subsidized affordable housing, some stakeholders involved in those types of development. I've noted that the city's current density requirements impact the financial feasibility of multifamily housing. So what we're hearing is we're not getting housing built because our existing density limitations are on the low side for getting a project to be able to be feasible.
Except we're getting complaints with the current density we have too.
Correct. Yeah. There's differing viewpoints on all this stuff.
I agree too. If this really actually made for more affordable housing being feasible, actually affordable housing and subsidized housing, it might be worth increasing density standards, but I think we're already too dense. So
yeah.
My personal point of view.
Okay. So where this is coming from, if you recall, with our housing needs analysis that we did, we're required to do as part of our comprehensive plan update, and the results of that based on our population projection, spit out a fairly high number of housing units that we need to build in the next 20 years to accommodate the projected population. So I think the question becomes kind of where do you put those units? Do you expand outward by expanding our UGB, or do you infill by increasing density limits and heights, or do you do a little bit of both, kind of a maybe a happy medium somewhere in between? So this is where this strategy is coming from. It's coming from both that and also our housing plan, which is to ensure that more of that housing that does get built is is affordable for the folks that really need it the most. So this implements Housing Plan Strategy 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, as well as Efficiency Measure Report Strategy 1.2. In terms of actual development code amendments, what it does is changes the use table of our multifamily residential district. Right now, the multifamily density is anywhere between 7 and 15. You can, if you go up to 20 units per acre, you can do so, but you have to get a conditional use permit, which means a little more review by the city to make sure that you mitigate the impacts. What we're talking about and associated with some of the the photos we showed you guys of different projects of what does higher densities look like in terms of massing and whatnot. Some of them were architecture that wasn't appropriate for sisters necessarily, but kind of gave you an idea of the massing. So out of that became let's kind of pump up the volume on the density a little bit to make some of that housing more feasible. Still, recognizing that our design requirements, design standards are in play here and can help mitigate that. And there's also been some discussion about whether or not we need to follow up with beefing those up a little bit. If we're going to allow a little bit bigger buildings, do we need to, increase the requirements on the design? It's a little bit of a, balancing act there because, the more you push the design standards, the tougher it is to build. And if that's our goal, then that's somewhat runs counter to that. But just specifics, we're talking about increasing the minimum from so 15 would be the minimum, up to 30 would be something you could do by right, which means you don't need the city to say it's okay. If you're going to go from 30 to 40, that's when you would need a conditional use, and we could really look at design and impacts of that height and say, we have a little more flexibility in terms of allowing that, a little more oversight. And then if you go to the next slide, 40 to 50 units per acre would only be allowed with a minor conditional use, as well as providing affordable housing. And as you can see up there, this would be the actual language in the code. So if you did go to that 40 to 50, you would have to provide evidence and guarantee that at least 30% of the units will be affordable to people with incomes below 80% of the area median income. Or if you want to hit a little higher mark on the median income, 150% or less, then you have to have more, 50% of the units would have to be affordable. And that affordable is defined right here. It's not paying more than 30% of your rent or your mortgage on housing. That's just a generally held figure. That 30% is kind of the threshold. You don't want to be paying more than that. Then you start getting into a little bit of trouble. And then that they come with a contractual obligations, that those be in place for at least 30 years. So, if we're giving up a little bit on density, allowing a slightly larger building, that's going to come with it's got to come with a community benefit and documented for a good period of time.
Can we do anything about, like in the Woodhill project, you've got these 26 townhomes basically towering over the neighboring residences. Is there any way that we can, in the code, somehow take the neighbors' concerns into that, or not allow the height near the property line where there are other residences? I mean, that's going to be it's a really big thing there, and it's going to be a big thing in other projects, I think.
So are you referring to the Woodlands project, or are you referring to the Sunset Meadows that's under review?
Sorry, yeah.
So that would, it's an application that's already in, so it's kind of vested to our existing code. However, they do have a multifamily site on there that would be required to get a site plan review in the future, and they could take advantage of this then, because all they have, we don't want to talk too much about this project, but all they would have is master plan approval for that. So that it could apply if this code goes into effect and they don't apply for site plan review until after that.
think if I may for Jack, I think he's referring to that as an example of allowance to build a massive building next to a residential area that has a smaller one as opposed in code. Like, I know that we've talked about this concept of sort of stair stepping. And is that the main point that you have?
Yes, you're not looking down into your
Right.
neighbor's backyard. The neighbor has no
Putting a
privacy.
three-story building up against a single-story
I can see.
residence.
I see what you're saying. More of a kind of a transition between the differing land uses.
Right.
So it would require conditional use. We are, have rules related to clear and objective standards, so we can't just apply kind of,
No, but in general,
subjective.
do we put something in the building code requiring a buffer between
Yes,
development?
you could do that. That's,
For the future, I'm not talking about this particular instance, but I'm just talking about for the future. If you're gonna have if you're gonna have something with multi-story and where you're allowing 30 units per acre, you could say, a buffer is required between that development and, an existing residential development.
yes, and we would, if, I understand where you guys are going, and I think it's a good idea. It's something we would, if it's not in our code currently, we'd want to write in specifically, like if there's, if you're bumping up multifamily against single family, you need to increase the buffer by, 10 feet or something like that, something to that effect, versus, conditional use, and that's just kind of, we want 25 feet, we have these new requirements that all of our standards relative to housing have to be clear and objective. So we could add something like that, but it would have to be something specific.
Right.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So one of the designers on the Woodlands project reached out to me and asked, "Hey, is there a separation requirement for the apartments that are abutting the cottage or townhome developments?" So it sounds like designers are used to codes, kind of building that in where there's like a 20-foot or 25-foot buffer between the taller or higher density versus the
Makes
single
common
story.
sense. Yeah.
So sounds like it's in other codes, and it's something we could research into.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Emmy said and say that you can do that. You can vary the setback by the height of the building, or just for development above a certain height, require a larger setback if it's adjacent to a lower density zone.
Good idea.
Okay. Any other questions on allowed density in the multifamily zone before we move on to the next one? No?
I have a general
sure.
question. It seems like there's a little bit of a conflict of interest in having the developer hire and pay for a traffic study and getting the result that typically allows them to do what they want. And I'm wondering how objective those traffic studies are. And quite frankly, I don't believe some of the traffic studies.
Okay, that's a good point. So you are correct. There's a little bit of an art form to traffic engineering, traffic studies, but they are based on, generally held standards for traffic trip generation and other kinds of requirements. I mean, there can be a little bit of artfulness to it, I guess. But, the city does have on contract our own transportation engineer that we pay that works for the city, that reviews all these traffic studies and pushes back where, he sees that there might be some too much poetic license going on or things that they don't agree with. And, if it involves a state highway, ODOT also gets involved with reviewing those too. So there's quite a few checks and balances on those. But yeah, good question.
You guys all know Joe, right? He's talked in front of us several times.
Yeah.
He typically represents the city with respect to the traffic studies.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe Bessman from Transite Consulting.
But it seems like we have a problem here, that the general opinion that we hear from the community is that traffic is bad now, and every traffic study we see says it's going to be okay. And I have trouble reconciling that myself. That, are we supposed to believe we're going to have plenty of water and we're going to have we have no problem with traffic, or traffic is within acceptable standards is probably the right thing. And I don't exactly know where we go with that, because the community is looking at us to bless this stuff. And I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah, we're required if it's a multifamily zone to allow, what the code says, and we're talking about even more density. And, in general, I don't think the traffic is bad 24/7, but there's certain times when the traffic gets really bad, and when you add with everything that's coming in, not just this next specific development, but the developments that are already approved, I really, just from being around a long time, don't see our roads being able to handle, even though the traffic studies say they can. I think we're going to be at a dead standstill.
I totally agree. It's really a serious problem already and going to get worse.
Are you mostly referring to Cascade Avenue, or are you thinking like outside of Cascade?
This roundabout connecting to the other roundabout with Barkley, being supposedly the bypass.
Local traffic too.
And local
We're
traffic.
always going to have traffic on Cascade, and the Barkley thing is just going to make for traffic problems getting in and out of Barkley Drive.
Right, I think this roundabout is going to be overloaded quite a bit, and I don't think that, I asked the question before, are the traffic studies taking into account the previous developments? And sure doesn't seem to me like they did, even though you say they have. That roundabout is going to be packed. It's a single lane roundabout.
Yes, yeah.
Because of that, I am against raising making for more higher density.
But you have to also note that the majority of that traffic is not Sisters residents. It's traffic, but it's people from out of town creating those problems. So when we think about locals adding to it, it adds to the overall traffic. But these are not the failures are not being caused by Sisters residents. In other words,
1,500 more cars on top of what is going through that roundabout is what we're talking about. We're not talking about what can we do unless we really build a bypass that goes around the town like they did in wine country. We're going to have the problem because ODOT's got that main highway running through Sisters.
All the traffic coming in from Mackenzie Meadows, all those subdivisions out there, and the high school traffic and all that. It's just a lot of it's local traffic.
What are we supposed to rely on in making decisions here? That I don't think gut's enough. We want to look to experts. So are we going to decide?
Well, supposedly we have traffic studies. That's what these are supposed to tell us.
I moved here from Philomath, and Philomath had a similar problem in that they lived, the community had two highways going through it, two highways that converged that went through it. And more people are driving to the coast, so more people are driving through Philomath, and more people were living on the coast. So when the weather was bad, people who lived on the coast were driving through Philomath. So now we've got the situation where so many people used to just come from the valley to go to Bend, driving through Sisters. Now there's so many people living in Bend and Redmond, and they're driving in the other direction to get away from the heat or the smoke. So we're in the middle. Part of our problem, not part of our problem. Sisters has been growing steadily since, when they say 2003, when the sewer went in, and then we've kind of gone kaboom. So we've increased our population. But part of it is where you have to accept the fact that what we used to call normal as driving through town, with just driving through town and not having to stop hardly at all to let people get through or stop behind cars. The norm now is just it's slower and slower and slower traffic. And I completely agree with you with the parking studies. I think part of them, sometimes they look like they're not as bad because if you're a resident, you learn how to drive around bad areas. You know, I mean, I will not drive down Cascade, and so I'll go down Hood, and so I bung up Hood. So I think that's just going to keep happening and happening, and we're going to have, as Bend grows, and unless we either change our bypass situation, it's a necessary growth problem that we're going to have.
I've got a question for Scott and then a couple of comments, and then we'll move on. You mentioned in these traffic studies that there is a level of acceptance or acceptability. Do we know by what standards that acceptability is taken from? Certainly isn't specifically what is acceptable in Sisters. It's something that's more aggregate than that. Is it what is acceptable in general, or how do they determine what acceptability is?
Well, it's generally determined by a level of service. There's level of service ratings, like it's usually related to delays at intersections. How long you would be sitting there before you can make a turn, and A through F is the rating. A being you pretty much go to the intersection, you're good to go. At the F, you could be waiting, 45 seconds or a minute longer. So a lot of communities use that as a generally accepted rating system, and they don't like their level of service to go below a certain level. So that's when improvements are required to help mitigate any of those level of service types of downgrades. So we have a transportation system plan that looks out 20 years. It's taken our population projections, just like the water plan, just like the wastewater plan, and looking at our overall road system to see what improvements we need to make to keep pace with growth. And we charge system and development charges from builders, and that goes into funds to make sure that we keep those roads at pace with growth and development. So it's not just keep packing things in and hoping that the existing system continues to work. It's actually making improvements, and probably at some point a bypass probably will be necessary, but it's not in our current transportation system plan.
The problem is, once you get the jam, the nightmare traffic jam, it takes like 10 years to fix it. By the time you design roads, get ODOT to go along and everything else.
So the comments I have for the commission, there's a few. Number one is we have to keep things in perspective. Sisters has doubled in size in the last 5 years. There's more people here. There's more people in the outlying subdivisions, and that's why there's more traffic. I mean, it's just the way it is. We all moved here at one point. Jack, you moved here a long time ago. Still, you moved here. You weren't born here.
You weren't born here.
And so we all are contributing to this. We all drive and we all contribute to it. And so if we want less traffic, and Scott, you've been promoting this, ride your bike, walk. We live in a town that's 1 square mile.
Yeah.
But when it's 20 degrees, 10 or 20 degrees.
I'm not saying that it's ideal, but I'm just saying,
There was
if
a
you're
bike
not
ride.
riding your bike and if you're not walking and you're driving, you're contributing to it. So, we're all in this together. We're all a part of this. So,
Look, I'm saying-
and the last thing I want to say, and I'll finish, is that we still don't even have a stoplight. So, we're doing a few things right. So,
But what I'm saying, I think we're all saying is traffic's already bad, always gonna be bad going through town. There's nothing we can do about that. But the local traffic, the more subdivisions we get in here, the worse it's gonna be. The more development, the worse it's gonna be, and we need to somehow slow that down, even to the extent that Shane Lundgren and one of the other people in the audience said, can we just say, we don't want, that's it. And I bet that 75-80% of the people in town surveyed would say, more development, but slow it down, not higher density. Higher density is ruining this town. The vision thing that we go through, we don't follow that at all. It's not our fault, but we can avoid some of or help with some of what we want to see with sisters, if we can slow down the development and the higher density. That's my take, for what it's worth.
Appreciate that. So, if I may, I might just keep moving. I'll note the transportation concerns, and maybe we can get a work session, get Joe Bessman in here and kind of give you guys an overview on transportation and all what the proposed mitigation is and how would they look at.
And what they see 20 years down the road.
Yeah, no, I think that's a worthwhile discussion, but just wanted to note that we do take that into consideration with that kind of planning. So it's not just left to chance. And it's updated regularly too, so that we kind of give a regular take on it and make sure it's up to date. So just moving along with the next code amendment, the proposal is to remove the floor area ratio requirements and increase the building heights in the MFR zone. Again, this relates back to the same notion of if we want to allow more housing for folks, if we want to try to address some of our housing cost issues. Right now, the zoning and the height are noted as barriers to getting that done. It doesn't mean that we're going to give up on our design standards. Just means that we're going to allow basically where we allow 50-foot tall buildings for MFR, we're allowing right now it says only 35 feet, up to 35 feet can be habitable. And the other 15 feet has to be just roof space, attic space, mechanical. What we're saying now is that envelope, let's allow that to be habitable. So we're not really increasing the overall height. We're just increasing the habitable space height.
Do you have to change the roof design to
You could do a flat roof. You could still do a peak roof if you wanted to. That top floor may be built into the roof structure. There's ways to do that. We also talked about potentially requiring some step backs for that extra height. Maybe that next story is step back so that you don't really feel the full impact of the building from the street level as an option. We threw that out. We've gotten some feedback from some of the architects in town saying that causes them some problems too, but something we can consider. We also need to keep in mind, and I think we noted this early in the process, talking to the local fire district, they don't really have adequate equipment to have a lot of tall buildings in town. They're okay with a few, but once you start getting above a certain number, they don't have the equipment to, address multiple fires that may occur at the same time. That affects their insurance rating in town. So that's something that we've been in communication with them, and it's going to be kind of a larger community-wide decision if we want to, if it turns out that there's more demand for that, we need to start talking about getting them improved equipment. The floor area ratio requirement, we felt it wasn't an adequate kind of way to measure building mass. Because if you have a really small lot, it doesn't give you a whole lot. If you have an extra big lot, that means you're going to get an extra big building. And so we don't feel like it's a great tool. So we're proposing to get rid of that and just use our height, design standards, setback requirements to kind of gauge that. So here's what it looked like in actual code language, eliminating the FAR requirement, and then just making that tweak to the bottom saying, it says multifamily under the comments, 5 or more attached units, 50 feet maximum building height. It just like you can see in there, it already allows 50-foot tall buildings for multifamily. It just means that you can do habitable units, which we think will help with some of the housing needs. I'll stop there for questions and comments on this one.
So I remember a while ago, we were talking about this, and I think it had to do with the proposed hotel as you came into town, and the height and fire equipment, and the fact that Black Butte has equipment that reaches up that high.
Yeah.
So I guess we could always call Black Butte too for assistance if we had multiple, hopefully not multiple fires going on at one time,
Right.
on the third story.
Yeah, I think the concern is the response time that it takes to get here, but yeah. So, yeah, it's an issue that's going to have to be addressed.
When we're talking about the setbacks, then the setbacks could be modified. We're talking about not using the square footage of floor square footage, but just general setbacks. But then with tall buildings, we would have to have a proviso of the setback if we're talking about having a buffer from
If it's next to like a single family or
Right.
smaller, yeah. Yeah, it would be the same provision applying to these taller buildings. Yeah.
Scott, do you know this Sisters Camp Sherman Fire Department, do they have a ladder truck? Do you know that?
Trying to remember. It's been a while since I've had this conversation. I don't know for sure. Yeah.
I can check.
I can have that information back when we bring it back for public hearing.
I'm pretty sure they do, Tom. I'm pretty sure I've seen it over at the fire station.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it only goes up a certain height, I know, because that came up with that hotel they were talking about.
There's no other comments. I can kind of move along, and just wanted to share a little bit about some of this, and we'll share the full results with you guys and the public here shortly if we haven't already. We're getting close to sharing the survey results. But the survey was open for quite about a month and a half or so, and we had about 150 responses. I'm looking at Emmy; she's the survey keeper.
141 plus a couple paper surveys, and several additional email comments addressing the survey. So, and to put it into perspective, the open house during the comp plan received 147 survey responses, so comparable engagement.
So I just wanted to give you guys a little sneak peek on this and just kind of hone in on the pertinent ones that are under discussion tonight. We're able to isolate comments completely, a cumulative comments, and we're also able to isolate comments from City of Sisters residents versus people who live outside of City of Sisters. And, we asked them some specific questions on terms of what their support is on these, one being no support, 3 being neutral, 5 being full support on some of these code changes. And we kind of explained, what the purpose was for why we were doing these. And increase allowed densities in the MFR zone. It was, the mean was about 3.14. Allow taller buildings in the MFR. And we also included downtown commercial and highway commercial, which right now we're not proposing that. We're just proposing in the MFR zone. It was a little less than the 3. 3 being neutral.
Okay.
Yeah. So, nobody said they full on 5, we love everything. Nobody said 0, we don't support it all, somewhere in between. And it's interesting when you isolate the comments from City of Sisters residents, the support for some of these things are actually higher than they are for people that don't live in Sisters, like in Sisters Country, which I found kind of interesting.
So, wait, are you talking averages or
Mean,
pretty much everybody?
the mean of, yeah. So, this one, make it easier or less costly to build affordable housing. It was up at 4, over 4. It's a little bit more of a general kind of statement. So you don't know what exactly folks were commenting on there, but just wanted to give you guys a taste. We'll send you guys the full kind of results, so you have those in place. The next one is zoning incentives for affordable or workforce housing. To encourage more housing of this type, zoning incentives are proposed to modify current development code requirements for parking and minimum lot sizes based on how many affordable units are provided and what level of AMI restrictions are proposed. Essentially, the more affordable housing you provide, to the lower economic rungs, the more zoning flexibility they would receive. This implements a housing strategy and an efficiency measures strategy. And this talks about, whether if you have, it defines workforce housing, affordable housing, and low-cost affordable housing. So a little lower to higher on the AMI scale, and the kind of the bonus that you would receive relative to that. The more we dug into this deeper, I realized that we already have something similar to this in our code today. This is a little snip from our existing code. Has some similar types of provisions. So it's already in there. I'm not sure how many times it's been utilized in the community. So we may just kind of keep what's in place and just kind of, if there's support, just kind of modify that existing section. The current one, says, it's similar stuff. It talks about a height bonus, which if we're just going to go to increase heights, to 50, we don't propose making that additive so that you can go even higher than that. We would probably just take that provision out. So it's an incentive to get a little more density. Question is, will people really utilize it if we're able to go up to 50 units per acre with our other changes? Do they really need it? Because we kind of already created somewhat of an incentive with that. So comments on that? Maybe there's not a whole lot to comment on at this point. We'll bring you back something a little more polished and focused, so you can comment on it at the next meeting. And then one more that we've kind of talked about, well, actually there's two more, but this one, right now in our downtown commercial zone, encompasses quite a bit of property. If you want to do residential in the DC zone now, you have to do it in a mixed use arrangement. We've talked a lot about this in our work sessions, where we've heard that providing commercial can be a barrier to getting units built. And do we really need all that mixed use zoning throughout our DC zone? And the solution was basically to create an overlay zone, not to rezone it, but you can see everything in kind of pink or salmon is DC zone, and there's different categories. B and A correspond with the different zoning requirements on Adams Street that are already in our existing code. Where you can have in B, you can have a little higher density, and as you get closer to the east side of Adams, it allows only lower density, and that's been in our code for quite a while. So that's not proposed to change. But you wouldn't need to do a mixed use development in areas designated as C or B and A. So it would just be along Main, Cascade, and Hood, primarily in our downtown core, that you would still have to do mixed use. It doesn't mean that you can't, if a developer wanted to do mixed use, they can still do it in there. It just means that if they want to do residential, they don't have to do the commercial.
When you want to do mixed use in downtown commercial, does it have to be above upper story like it is over in North Sisters Business Park?
It says above or next to, but it has to be attached. Is that,
100% of the street frontage needs to be commercial, as well as 50% of that ground floor use. So that back half and that entire second floor can be residential.
Yeah, the reason I ask this is I know that we have a lot of elderly population, and having it above doesn't work very well when they have to go up flight of stairs and there's a 12-foot lower level, so the stairs get to be pretty steep and long.
Mhm.
And it just precludes them from being able to rent those units.
Right.
So, but so you could build them back at 50%.
Yeah,
Is-
yeah. But if it's not an alley loaded lot, that becomes a barrier because I think the code also requires parking to be accommodated on site. And so, or I've heard from developers that they want to be able to provide a garage, and then that takes up that whole 50% footprint on the ground floor for residential use. So kind of parking competes with that ground floor residential use.
Downtown commercial, you can have your building go all the way, there's not even setbacks. And parking, it can be all street frontage
Correct.
in most situations, correct?
Yeah.
So, no.
So Scott, tell me well, my neighbor across the street has a large lot and he's been planning on, building a house there. It's in downtown, the east downtown, commercial Adams Avenue overlay. Does the code preclude him from just building a house for himself on a large lot?
Is he, I think it's is it west of Fur or east?
It's
Is it
east of Fur.
east of Fur?
So,
I'll defer to my code expert here.
So with the Adams Avenue overlay, there are separate design standards for those residential developments, and it's not the same footprint as a commercial development. So the house was built on Adams Avenue on the east end. I think the rear setback is still 15 feet. There's a 10-foot setback for the front porch, pretty much a standard residential zone development standards. Whereas these new areas being designated for some more standalone residential uses, like area labeled C. I don't know what those design standards will be, if they'll be a copy paste of Adams Avenue overlay as it is right now, or if they'll reflect commercial development standards.
So he could build a house, just a residence on that large lot.
But yeah, I would still have that 10-foot front setback, a proper backyard. It wouldn't be built right to the property line.
Okay.
He will have to put in a sidewalk.
Yeah, I know he's waiting for the streetscape.
parking,
Wait for the
frontage parking.
streetscape to go in and.
So we'll need to decide on what kind of requirements we have in C. So for example, that long area, I think that's the C on the right top is the big field behind the existing retirement center. We would have to decide what kind of zone requirements, or you guys would, that for single family or housing, multifamily housing. Is C multifamily?
No, C is just the areas where you wouldn't have to do mixed use.
Right, so you could do residential, but is
You
it,
can do residential,
Single
but
family or is it multifamily,
I don't think single family is not an allowed use outside of that section of Adams Street. Emmy can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, unless you're on Adams, and have those there's special provisions along Adams. Anywhere else, it says in the DC zone, dwellings located above, within, or attached to a commercial building, not including single-family detached dwellings. So,
I'm confused.
Yeah, so Matt, I saw you try to chime in.
Yeah, we're not, I'll just say we're not proposing to change any of the other development code or design standards that are already applied in those areas now. So if someone is building multifamily in that area, they'd still have to comply with all your multifamily design standards. They still have to comply with other standards in your downtown commercial zone. All we're talking about here is allowing essentially a pure residential use in those areas that are labeled C here. So
I understand that, but the residential use being defined multifamily then? What is is it defined as just residential use, period?
well,
it's
yeah.
just only single-family duplex and townhomes are allowed on Adams Avenue by themselves. Everywhere else, it has to be multifamily.
Okay.
Any other questions on on this overlay zone? No? Okay. How are we doing on time here? We got about 45 minutes. We want to probably get a break between the meetings. The last the last proposed development code amendment we want to discuss with you was facilitate middle housing types, which is another strategy in our housing plan and efficiency measures to be able to provide more opportunities for affordability by introducing some units that tend to be on the smaller side into our existing residential and multifamily zones, just giving more housing choice types. It's an effective way to provide some infill development to prevent the need for a large urban growth boundary amendment. So it includes duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, cottage clusters. Those are those missing middle are like we build a lot of single family and we build a lot of large apartment complexes, but we don't tend to build a whole lot of those housing types in between. And there's a variety of reasons for that. So what you've heard probably with the state passing a law, House Bill 2001, that communities over 10,000 have to provide duplexes in their single-family zone, and I think it's over 25,000 they have to provide up to fourplexes by right in residential zones. Is a big change, and it just went into effect recently. And Matt's been working on the model code, so he's really knowledgeable about these things. We being less than 10,000 don't have to implement this. We're exempt. So if we were to implement these things, we'd be doing them by choice. And we're not limited to some of the requirements that the state does apply to some of these types of housing strategies. So this was in our housing plan. It's one of our strategies. We talked about this a little bit, but here's a chance to kind of dig into it a little deeper. What are they? We talked about diverse housing options, such as duplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, multiplexes, which we're not talking about here. These house-scale buildings fit seamlessly into existing residential neighborhoods and support walkability, locally serving retail and public transportation options. They provide solutions along a spectrum of affordability to address the mismatch between the available U.S. housing stock and shifting demographics combined with the growing demand for walkability.
We are allowing, we do have cottage developments in town now, and the new development and Forest Service property has a lot of cottage development.
That's correct. Yeah. This would not be a change to our code by implementing or adding cottage uses. It already exists. So good point. So in order to accommodate these, and we again use the model code that was put together that a lot of communities are implementing to just help with the implementation of this law. But it generally, requires smaller lot sizes to implement, to keep the massing small, to keep the affordability there, to have them blend in better to the neighborhood. So, in addition to, we talked about this. This is an addition from our discussion last time about in terms of infill tools that we've been talking about. We hadn't talked about single family lots at that point, and the comment came up last time that there was at least some support on the commission for considering smaller single family lot sizes. Current standard in the residential district is 6,000. This would be proposed to go down to 4,500. And just to give you a little perspective, Saddlestone, you've gone down there, you kind of get a taste of kind of what 3,300 square foot lots are kind of look like and how they develop out, to give you a little bit of sister's perspective on what a 4,500 square foot kind of looks like. So
Saddlestone is 3,300?
yeah, some of those lots are at that rate.
And how did that work when
How did it work?
Yeah, I mean, how were they able to do it?
I think it was through the master plan process allows exceptions to zone district standards if you can make the case that it's, it's not, it's still maintaining, safety and health and I think there's some, it's not the exact word, but the attractiveness of the neighborhood or something like, some language like that. If you make a finding like that, then you can get exceptions. I think that's how that transpired.
That's a pretty big jump, it sounds like, from a pretty big exception.
Jack and I were on the commission when we approved that.
Was that in 2006, 2005?
So it was originally a polished development, and the homes in the polished development were significantly larger. And then I believe the name was Olson Development out of
Monmouth.
Purchased it from,
They didn't purchase it. They were the architect that the owner,
they took it over from Polish.
somebody did, and then they hired Olson to do the design work.
So Olson put together a revised master plan as a result, and then they came to us, they made the presentation. There's no building going on at the time, so it seemed like a good idea.
And then Olson then turned it over to Woodhill Homes to finish off the.
Yeah, I was just wondering, not criticizing or anything, I was just wondering how it worked.
It's an interesting, I live there and I live on a piece of property that is a larger lot, probably twice as big as the 3,500. So the 3,500 square foot lots are just on that north and south side of Black Butte Avenue.
What's your take on satellite, the way the 3,300 square foot lots work?
The reason I'm not a fan of it is because, I think they should have had 0 lot line so that houses could have been built up to the lot line, and then you could have had a 10-foot yard on each side of the house. So that each house has a 5-foot setback, and, it looks to me like the yards are unusable,
Big enough to put your dog out there.
pretty much. Yeah, and so it's not something for me. And if I was I'm a married person and I'm older and I don't have any kids at home, I would have purchased a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, maybe 3-bedroom, 2-bath, smaller place. And they built some pretty big places on those small lots. And there's some families that have moved in and there's not really places for the kids. So that's why I think some of the amenities that Payless had was they like almost 3 acres of open space, a park, a pavilion, a playground structure. So I think there was some trade-off between the city and the developer. I like the Olson homes. I like his design. He designs nice. He was uncar friendly, so everybody had a garage in the back as opposed to a driveway and a garage in the front.
They didn't really allow for enough parking, that's one thing.
Well, no, they allowed for enough parking, but people just have put too much stuff in their garages.
And then some of the skirts of the garages are like a little Toyota might fit in there, but.
Yes, I mean, the 2-car garages are 2-car garages, and the single-car garages have a place to park another car, but it's.
So am I right in saying that they weren't supposed to allow parking on the street on that?
In the Payless HOA CC&Rs, it does not allow for resident or homeowner or rental parking on the street.
Right, but it's happening more all the time.
That neighborhood is struggling with trying to get people, but people are listening and.
Yeah.
I think the key in that situation is if you do the smaller lots, you need to have the parking on the street allowable for overflow or for overnight parking. We don't want to see things stored in the right of way. In fact, we have ordinances against that. But if you go to smaller lot sizes and you have the alleys, you need to have the on-street parking to help with the overflow too.
It is a wide enough street.
Will that be in our if we reduce lot sizes, that's in the current code that we have on?
It's one of our street standards, yeah, that you have to have a local street that has parking wide enough for parking on both sides. So these other lot sizes, I thought I'd have Matt, since he's here, and he was so involved with the model code, kind of, I talked a little bit about why the smaller lots on these other things. Matt, would you kind of give your little kind of synopsis on why the lot sizes are proposed the way they are?
Sure. Yeah. Uh, Generally, the lot sizes that you all currently require in terms of lot sizes um, for duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes, frankly, make it really for developers infeasible, not infeasible, but the preference is always going to be to build a single family detached home when you require that amount of space for a plex. So you just won't, other than as part of a master plan community where you do allow some reductions in lot sizes, if your base standards are this high in terms of the lot sizes for those plexes in particular, same thing really for attached, single family attached housing, you just frankly won't see those plexes being built because it's just not going to be profitable for a developer to build them given what the pricing is likely to be for them. So when we, as part of that middle housing model code, and also as part of some of the middle housing work we did for other communities in Oregon, took a look at what's really financially feasible in terms of providing the opportunity to build those kinds of housing. It's really important to require smaller or to not require as much lot area per unit. So that's sort of the point of reducing the numbers and tying them to the amount of per unit of a plex or of a single family attached development. So that's kind of where that 2,500 square feet per dwelling unit comes in. That still means that, for a triplex, that's a 7,500 square foot lot. For a quadplex, it ends up being more as well, but it's not 10,000 per unit for the quadplex or 75 or 9,000 for the triplex. So that's sort of the point of that. It also is, and Scott said this earlier, it tends to incentivize smaller units, and it also tends to reduce the massing by in combination with the lot standards, not allowing for such a large building. So that's the point behind the recommended changes in the lot sizes. And then I'm sure Scott will talk about this in a little while, but along with these changes in lot sizes are some potential design standards associated with these middle housing types, and they relate to kind of how entrances are oriented towards the street, how parking is designed, and then some possible kind of design standards that could be applied both to single family attached homes, but that also could be applied to duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in terms of requiring, similar to what your multifamily standards do now, requiring that a certain number of design features be incorporated in the design of a home. So they're not just essentially boxes without those kind of design features. So that's my little spiel on some of the standards around middle housing. I think if you choose to allow these types of housing more broadly, it's important to adjust the lot sizes, or you won't see them developed. And your housing needs analysis does indicate that there is a need for and a demand in a market for some of these types of units. They're not ever going to be the majority of housing units in your city. That's not what that housing needs analysis shows. It assumes they're still a relatively small percentage of the total number of units. So it's really just about providing standards that make it possible to build these things from a development perspective and from a pricing perspective. So now I'll actually stop.
Thanks, Matt. Are there any questions to Matt on that before we go into kind of some of the design requirements? So Matt said if we're gonna, like if we allow these things, we want to put some design standards on them to make sure that they fit into the community correctly. But we'll go into those. Looks like Jack's got a question.
Yeah, I think I think I brought this up at a previous meeting, but it seems to me that we talk about lowering the lot sizes and lowering all these things to make it cost savings for the developer so they can build it for less. But it seems to me that benefits, I might be wrong here, but it's much more benefit to the developer than it is to any potential buyers, because the developers, they're going to get a market, whatever the market will bear for these houses, especially in Sisters, where housing is in demand. They don't go, okay, I'm going to spend 200,000 building this, so I'm going to mark it up, this much. They look at the market and they're going to, so yeah, great for cost savings, but does that really benefit the community and the people who want housing?
Mhm.
I mean,
So I guess I'd say a couple of things. One, I mean, you're right. It doesn't guarantee a cost savings to the buyer or the renter. I think my point is more that it's not so much about saving costs for the developer. It's more about making it financially feasible to build these forms of housing at all. And that you just won't see them built outside of some master planning situation, which also increases the cost of development and the time it takes to go through the land use permitting process. And I think that's one of the things that we heard in our interviews with folks, is that the sort of combination of some of your standards just makes it very difficult to build some of these forms of housing at all. And it's not that they're not getting built at all, but you saw a period, frankly, of time where there was really none of this housing getting built, other than the things that were permitted, over 15 years ago. And so you make a very good point. I don't disagree with it, but it's really more about making it possible to provide some of these housing options in Sisters for people who do need them and do want a smaller home and would be happy to live in a duplex or a cottage cluster development or something of that nature. So but yeah, you're right. I mean, it doesn't guarantee that the cost savings are going to be passed on. It creates a potential opportunity because typically people are not going to pay as much for a unit in a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex as they are for a single family detached home.
Think about it also this way: if without these options, somebody's most likely just to build a single family. What's the average price of a single family right now? Probably 750,000. If they have these opportunities, they may build a threeplex, and those units may go for 400,000. Still very expensive, but it's hitting a different segment of the market that probably needs that here in Sisters.
Okay.
Scott, I have a question. The definition of duplex, triplex, fourplex, is a duplex one unit built on one piece of property that has two residences?
Two residences on one lot.
And so two residents on one lot. So it's not like I could own it.
Yeah,
I could rent out one side and live in the other side.
right.
Or I could just be a landlord and and then what happens when it's all right, is it called then a townhouse if it's two lots with a zero lot line?
Yeah, if it's a one unit, if they're attached, but they're each on their own lot, is this we call single family attached,
Single family.
also a townhome concept. Yeah,
So same thing with sixplexes.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. Any other questions on this page before we kind of review a little bit of the design standards? I see it's 5:05. Chair Seymour, you want to try to shoot for getting done at 5:20 or so that we can have a little time before the public hearing?
5:20, 5:22.
Okay.
Got a little transition time.
Okay. So we haven't. This is just maybe kind of new to you guys, and that's fine. You're kind of soaking it in. So this is the residential zone. This is the multifamily zone. Kind of just talking about the same things we were just talking about. But if we're going to allow these things, we don't want to just allow them without any design standards, so that they fit into our community fabric and don't in a complementary way. So these are, a lot of these are taken from the model housing code, model housing code, talks about applicability. And then, there's some certain elements, design elements that we think are standard or kind of fundamental to good design. One is making sure that, you can see an entryway, like a door, front door to a house. Sometimes, we've seen in the past where garage doors just dominate the front facade and you couldn't tell where the front door is because it's just dominated by the garage door. This provision here makes sure that that the entrance be no more than 8 feet from the front wall of the house. In this case, in this graphic, it just shows you see a garage to the left, and then you can see the front part of the house. Just making sure that that entryway is visible, and that's one just characteristic of creating neighborhood, creating neighborliness is making sure that there's eyes on the street for safety. So that's just one kind of feature that we would propose adding. There's some other criteria that the entrance must either face the street, or if you want to put it at an angle, you can see the one up on the upper right, 45-degree angle. Or if you have two units, kind of like a duplex, like you were talking about on one lot, you could have a combined entryway where you see on the bottom where the doors front doors could be facing each other, but open up on a common space. Or that they open up onto a front porch of at least 25 square feet and have at least one entrance facing the street or have a roof. Another element is making sure that it's just not a blank wall facing the street. So this would require that a minimum of 15% of the street-facing facades be windows or entry doors to create a kind of more of a pleasing facade and more welcoming facade to the street. And then when you talk about some of the biggest impacts to these, you talk about driveways and garages. Preferably they would be off of an alley, that you would have the garages off of an alley, that so you wouldn't even see the driveways or the garage doors, and instead you'd be looking at windows and doors and hopefully front porches and those kinds of things, more neighborly. Where you don't have a alley, there's some standards to make sure that your distances, your driveway widths don't exceed 50% of the frontage. So like here, yeah, there's an A and a B on this exhibit. It says the garage or off-street parking area is separated from the street or property. Oh, let's see, let me back up. It says garages and off-street parking areas shall not be located between a building and a public street other than an alley, except in compliance with these standards. That you have it's separated from a street by another dwelling, or that the combined width of all the garages and outdoor on-site parking and maneuvering areas does not exceed a total of 50% of the street frontage. So those are just tools to kind of mitigate the negative impacts of a driveway or a garage when you're talking about these middle housing units. Talks about maximum driveway approach widths. Talks about where lots have more than one frontage, they're on a corner lot. I won't go into a whole lot of detail on these right now, but other than to say, these are designed to make sure that these units fit in appropriately into the neighborhood. So those were talking about triplexes and quadplexes. These standards apply to single family attached. Commissioner Rees, you were just talking about that. These would be more like townhome type style developments. And this is where you start getting a little bit more of the design. And we have the flexibility to require more of these. This one in the model code was only allowed to require two to those communities that were required to implement this. And the thinking behind that, I think, was to not get too carried away with design on some of these. The idea was to get more housing units, and the state didn't want to see us see those communities add so many design requirements onto those units that they weren't cost effective and nobody built them. we're not subject to those same requirements, but we could add as many as we want. So things like a roof dormer, a minimum of 4 feet in width, a balcony, a minimum of 2 feet in depth and 4 feet in width, accessible from an interior room, bay windows, offsets of the facade, an entryway that is recessed, a covered entryway, a porch. So these are kind of examples of design standards that we could require. We could require these for all the different types of middle housing units to make sure that we don't just get blank walls, that there is some level of design interest. All right, any thought or questions on these in terms of, do you find these helpful? Would you think that we should require more than 2? Scott?
So first time we've started to talk about design standards, so it's good to see them, and I think we need some time to absorb those. A couple of questions. We have some design standards in residential code in town right now. And how do these stack up to those? Are these more severe or the same, or what's your thought there?
I might, Emmy reviews most of our building permits, so she's more in tune with this. So Emmy, can you address that question?
So as far as the residential and multifamily residential zoning code, we require a minimum of 5 architectural features on the front or any street-facing facade, and then only 3 on the sides where it's not facing the street. So 2 per unit, dwelling unit, would equate to, like in this picture, this is 4 dwelling units. If there's 2 different architectural features on each, that's a total of 8 different varying features.
In a single building?
In a single, yeah, plain elevation. In reviewing the triplexes and duplexes in the, the Mackenzie Meadows Village project that's over by the high school, we did have to, our code also accommodates architectural variation between the different buildings. So even though there's 8 different architectural features on this one building, the next building can't have the same exact facade. So our code also accommodates that variation. So that's my.
So I guess my main point is that there should be some consistency between the way that those are applied, so that the standards aren't significantly different. The other thing that I had in mind, it doesn't seem to me to be any requirement to stagger the front plane of the structure. And I think that's important to get good visual variety when these structures are built. So I would like to see something like that.
Yeah, that's just real quickly. That's kind of what item D is doing, is changing the plane of the facade. But it's one of all of these options. So you could make that essentially a required option and a required standard, and then require folks to do 3 or 4 or however many more of the other ones you want to do. That's just one thought, as opposed to having it just be sort of one of a menu of options. And I would just add to what Emmy said. Yes, you already require some pretty similar things for multifamily in your MFR zone. And I think, yeah, good point about making sure there's some consistency in what you're applying and requiring to different types of housing. I think, as Scott said, in looking at that middle housing model code, the intent was for that, and for cities that need to be consistent with the middle housing model code, the intent was to put kind of single family detached and middle housing on more of an even plane. And that's why that code doesn't require too many more design standards for, let's say, townhouses than it would for single family detached. And for cities that need to comply with that, they actually can't add additional design standards to that are not in the middle housing model code to some of these middle housing types, unless they apply them to all housing, including single family detached. So as Scott said, you guys have some more flexibility in terms of what you can apply, because you're not subject to those same requirements. but the attempt was sort of to pull in at least some of the types of things that were discussed and vetted through that statewide process. And because there were advisory committees, that had folks from kind of all over the state looking at those standards. So they'd kind of gotten vetted through that process. So that's why we kind of started with these standards, but recognize that you likely want to tailor some of these to make sense, for what you're doing in Sisters. So that's just a little more, I guess, background or context on some of this stuff.
I'd like to see if we could encourage developments that have alleyway entrances, and so that it is more of a community, so that you have a front porch and an entryway, and the garage and everything is in the back. I've seen that over in a few developments here, and it works really well. I think it's a friendlier design in general than having all the cars parked in the front.
Would you want it to be like a requirement that you have to have a front porch as opposed just to a stoop?
No, I'm not saying, I'm just more concerned with the alleyway in the back and the garage in the back rather than in the front of the house. No matter what you have in the front, but maybe there's a way to encourage that, some of these developments, give a bonus for it or something.
Scott had a comment.
Well, I was just going to say that the code that was developed for 2001, of course, is generic, applying across the state. And I recognize that we need to find this balance between the cost to build and achieving the ultimate result of more affordable housing. But we have to remember that Sisters is a scenic town, and we're not a town of 10,000 people. And so I think we need to pay attention to that as we're developing our standards, so that, that the scenic value or the scenic character of Sisters brings value to the community. And it isn't just to the eyes, it's also to the pocketbook. And so I would suggest we remember that.
Tom, did you have?
No, I mean, I think a lot of times, most of the time, building a front porch, is outside that it's outside the interior, so it's an extra cost. But it does add a lot to the neighborhood when people are sitting on their front porches, having a cup of coffee or having something to drink or their lunch in the afternoon. And I actually think that making that a requirement, front porches are required, would be a step in that direction.
Yeah, that was required as a part of some of the McKenzie Meadows. Do you remember that? You were on county, you were on the commission then. There were certain areas where they were requiring that they had to have them.
I don't remember it specifically, but I think with proper jogging, I could.
We're pretty much at our time limit here, and I'm pretty much at the end of my presentation. So just wanted to remind you that the next anticipated steps were to be a public hearing on November 17th on these, where we'll present them informally and take public comment and consider what your recommendation is on them. And if you recommend approving them, then they would scheduled to go to council on November 30th. And then November 17th would be along with the efficiency plan measures and the housing plan update at the same time. And then if those get approved, the thinking would be that in 2023, we would start to be bringing some more development code amendments back to you that are aligning with the recommendations of those plans. So with that, I don't have anything else, and thank you for your time and comments.
Any final comments, questions from the commission before we take a break?
I'm good.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Emmy. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to reconvene at 5:30 for the public hearing. We're in recess.
Thank you.
Even disclosures. Okay, I got it.
Great.
I'm just going to take a quick moment to say that a green Toyota has its lights on across the street. Someone just wanted me to let you know that if your lights were left on for a green Toyota.
Commissioners, is everybody ready? Ready. Emmy, are you ready?
I'm ready and the recording is live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the Planning Commission public hearing scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Thursday, November 3rd, 2022. I now call the hearing to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from July 7th, 2022, August 11th, 2022. Do I hear a motion from any of the commissioners to approve the minutes?
I make that motion.
Noted. Commissioner Reese makes the motion. Anyone second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of approval of minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving along, visitor communication. This is the time provided for individuals wishing to address the Planning Commission regarding issues not already on the agenda tonight. Does anyone in the audience have any comments or statements that they would like to make up at the podium that does not have anything to do with the hearing tonight? Perfect, thank you. Moving along, we'll go ahead and move forward with the hearing tonight. This is the time set for a continued public hearing on city file numbers MP 22-01, sub 22-01, and MNR 22-02, an application for a master plan development, tentative subdivision, and minor partition on a 12.92 acre property in the multifamily residential district to allow for a 71 lot residential residential development with 22 lots for single family detached dwellings, 48 lots for attached townhome dwellings, and one parcel for an approximately 72 to 124 unit multifamily residential development. The meeting is now called to order. The application is submitted by Woodhill Homes and is now fully in order. Conduct of hearing. The continued public hearing will be conducted as follows. A, staff will make a presentation and commissioners may ask questions to staff. B, entry of additional correspondence received into the record. C, opening the public hearing for testimony in the following order. 1, brief applicant presentation. 2, testimony from others. 3, rebuttal testimony from applicant. D, questions of staff, if any, by the Planning Commission. E, closed public testimony portion of hearing, no further testimony. And F, discussion and decision by the Planning Commission. Testimony. Testimony will be accepted in person or remotely via Zoom. If you would like to speak, please provide your testimony after you are called. If you do not wish to provide testimony, please say no testimony after you are called. Any questions should be directed to me as the chair. When you testify, please state your name and address for the record. Please speak clearly and loudly to ensure testimony is heard, as this hearing is being recorded. Callers will be muted after their testimony concludes. At my discretion, I may limit testimony to 3 minutes per person. I would encourage those wishing to speak to keep testimony concise and relevant to the issue before us this evening. It is encouraged to simply agree with the point made by another person instead of remaking the point. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulations that the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Testimony that is not directed towards applicable or potentially applicable approval criteria, even if a strong point, is ultimately not relevant. For the deliberations, the applicable substantive criteria are listed in the staff report. These are the criteria the Planning Commission must use in making its recommendation. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulations that the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Testimony that is not directed towards applicable or potentially applicable approval criteria, even if a strong point, is ultimately not relevant. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the Planning Commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Disclosures. At this time, I ask the members of the Planning Commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. When your name is called, please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. Commissioner Davidson?
No bias, ex parte contacts. I intend to participate.
This is Chairman Seymour. I intend to participate. No conflicts, no bias, no ex parte contact, except I do drive by the property in question on a daily basis. Commissioner Davidson? I'm sorry, Commissioner Blumenkron?
I have no conflicts or bias. I plan to participate, and I ride by the area on my bike all the time, 242.
Commissioner Nagel?
I have no conflicts or bias or ex parte, and I intend to participate.
Okay. Commissioner Reese?
I have ex parte. I did walk the property. I have no conflict of interest. I do have a bias because I live in a community where a majority of the homes were built by Woodhill Homes, and I will not participate, and I will not comment, and I ask to be excused.
You are excused. Thank you. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the ability of any commissioner to hear this matter? Okay, with that, I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Seymour. Good evening, Commissioners, and all those in attendance here tonight in the room and those on Zoom. I'm Matthew Martin, City of Sisters Planning Division, and as outlined by the Chair, what's before you today is a continued hearing on a proposed master plan development characterized or labeled as Sunset Meadows in the multifamily residential district and located in the southwest portion of the city. I want to acknowledge that my staff report is that was presented at the prior hearing the previous portion of this hearing on October 20th, as well as in my staff findings and recommendation that were produced in the staff report that was available 7 days prior to that hearing and continues to be available. And so my comments will be brief in that I'm here to discuss some procedural elements in that we received a request from the applicant who wasn't able to attend tonight to continue the public hearing to a later date. I'll read verbatim his request. That due to the hearing continuation and scheduling conflicts, we request that the 100-day review time period be extended an additional 45 days and continue the public hearing to December 15th. So with that request being made by the applicant during the active hearing proceedings, that's before the commission to either grant that request for continuance or close the oral portion of the public hearing and leave the written record open. I do want to acknowledge and forgive us on kind of the timing and the dates that have been referenced in that it was unforeseen that this conflict from the applicant would be realized. And the reference to December 15th is the regular date of the standing meeting of the Planning Commission, that being the third Thursday of every month. Unfortunately, in polling the commissioners, commissioner availability is limited on the 15th. So we are looking to reschedule that December 15th meeting to December 8th. So I recommend, as you entertain this request for a continuance, that any continuation be considered for December 8th. And it's staff's position and recommendation that you do realize or approve the request for the continuance of the full oral and written record and the public hearing to December 8th, given the applicant's conflict as well as the general public interest in the project. So I'll leave it at that, available for comment.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to address the crowd, and then I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to continue as it's specified. But I want to make sure everybody understands what this procedure means and how this is going to go. So folks, what's happened is because the applicant isn't here tonight, they've asked to continue it and a decision not be basically made tonight. So we'll go through our procedure, but we still want to hear from you tonight. And so once we go through some of the other legal things that we need to do, we're going to go ahead and take public testimony from everybody because we want to hear what you guys have to say. So allow us to go through the technical stuff here, and we'll go ahead and get things underway. Okay? If you guys are okay with this, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. I move to continue the public hearing for City Files MP 22-01, Sub 22-01, and MNR 22-02 to 5:30 p.m. on December 8th, 2022 at City Hall. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Do we have the opportunity for discussion of the motion?
Sure.
Can you,
So
Commissioner Davidson, can you speak into the mic, please?
I asked if we could discuss the motion.
Of course.
That has been granted. So my question is, do we need to make this decision now or at the end of public comment? Could we do it at the end of public comment?
We can certainly do it at the end of public comment.
Okay. And my second question, or my other comment, is that I'm a little shocked that the developer couldn't provide any representation, and especially since they were non-substantially represented at the last public hearing. And so I struggle to hold favor with the request.
I can agree,
I agree too. You should have had somebody here.
and they should have last time.
Thank you.
Well,
Can you speak into the microphones, please?
so good comments. A motion has been presented and seconded. Clearly there's consensus. And so I think the right thing to do is actually vote on that motion, and we can proceed accordingly. If somebody has an alternative motion that they would like to make after the vote, I would encourage that.
Was there any value into delaying this vote until after testimony?
I'm going to defer to staff from a procedural standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. Acknowledging that the interest or intent of conducting the motion now earlier in the proceeding is to afford the opportunity for those that wish to testify to defer that testimony to the later date. So to honor their time tonight or their comments now, either we must afford the opportunity to comment tonight, but they certainly can defer to any decided upon later date.
Thank you.
With respect to following through with the motion that was presented and seconded, is that something that we need to follow through with, or can we nix that motion and proceed and come back and determine the continuance after testimony has been given to the commission's satisfaction?
I believe it can die without a vote, but I want to make sure that we're procedurally on track to not run afoul.
Yeah, alternatively, you could withdraw your motion.
Okay, I will go ahead and withdraw the motion, and after there's an opportunity for public testimony, we'll revisit the procedural stuff.
Thank you.
Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
If I could, one other comment or remark. I do want to acknowledge again that what's before you with that request by the applicant, there are two options, that being to honor the request in full by continuing the full public hearing to a later date, or at a minimum, leave the written record open for 7 days. So those are the options procedurally in our code. I do want to acknowledge before closing that we do have Garrett Crossteck, County Legal Counsel, online as available. Excuse me, correction, City Legal Counsel. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Correspondence, have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the agenda materials?
We have. Since the publishing of the Planning Commission's packet last Thursday, we received several comments that have been posted online, included in the record, as well as provided to you in hard copy tonight.
Thank you. Questions of staff. At this time, I will ask each commissioner whether they have any questions of staff. Questions will be stated by each commissioner. Staff will respond after all the questions have been asked by the commissioners. When your name is called, please ask your questions or indicate that you have no questions. We're going to do it a little simpler. Any questions for staff?
Not at this point.
No.
Okay. So moving along, next item is applicant presentation. We did see a brief presentation by the applicant last hearing. Since there is no representation here tonight, we are going to move on to the next item, which is questions of the applicant. We'll go ahead and move along from there as well, which puts us into public testimony. We will now invite members of the audience to provide testimony. If you are providing testimony, please state your name and address for the record before proceeding with your testimony. For those attending via Zoom, we will conduct a roll call and see who wants to provide testimony. When your name and number is called, please indicate whether or not you will be providing testimony. So folks, how many of you were here at the hearing a couple of weeks ago? Okay, so we want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak tonight that wants to. And I would just ask that everyone remain civil and organized. And it's important that if you have already spoke, to give your fellow citizens an opportunity to do that. If you do have something to say that is new or fresh from your previous testimony, I definitely would encourage you to speak. If we have time to have folks that have already spoke at the previous hearing that would like to speak again, we'll certainly encourage that. But let's make sure that we let our fellow citizens speak that haven't had a chance yet. I do have a list of folks here that would like to talk tonight. Emmy, do we have anyone on Zoom tonight that's joining us?
I'm not seeing the tiles as I normally would, so I'm going to call out names. Do you want me to call out names directly, or?
Why don't we'll get through some of the folks that are here in person, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll see if there's anybody on Zoom that wants to share with us, and then we'll resume back with our folks that are here in person.
Great, okay, thank you.
Okay. So when I call your name, please come on up to the lectern, or if you choose that you don't want to say anything, just let us know. When you do get up to speak with us here this evening, please make sure that you say your name and your address loudly in the microphone for the record. First person is Wayne Price.
Good evening, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. I have several concerns, first of which on the, Wayne Price, 148 North Wheeler Loop.
Thank you.
Some concerns. On your traffic management plan, it was changed in December of last year. And during that original report, it estimated that the traffic growth on 242 would be 4.2%. On the revised, they had a little red dot pointing down. And it also signified the same with Cascade Boulevard and one other street. So I have concerns in regards to how that came about. Also reading the traffic management plan, one of the ways that, or a couple of the ways that was suggested to reduce congestion was to encourage walking programs, carpool, things that perhaps are not really relevant for this community in general. The second thing I had to bring up was the lot size. The applicant requested a smaller lot size. And the question is why? Since the part of the issue is congestion here, not only traffic, but otherwise, why make it smaller? Why not make it fewer houses instead of more? So those are just a couple of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy Beaver. Take your time.
Betsy Beaver. I'm at 1640 West Carson Avenue in Sisters. I can't help but thinking that the location of this proposed development is right at the beginning of Scenic Byway. And what I saw in the Nugget last week, with little squares representing lots, no parks, no large streets with verges on them, reminded me of a song that we used to sing back in the 70s in San Francisco. Little houses on the hillside, little houses made of ticky-tacky, little houses, little houses, little houses all the same. There are pink ones, there are blue ones, there are green ones and yellow ones, but they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. And I'd like to suggest that we have a little more pride in our community than to continue to build places like where I live, which is where all the houses are the same and they have little lots. You know, it just ill befits our reputation as a friendly, small town. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Warrenholtz.
Linda Warnholtz, 269 North Wheeler Loop, The Pines. My concern is the density of the property, of course, but also the amount of building that we've got going on in this city. Excuse me. We haven't moved the school yet. We still have the Grand Peaks that are building. Clear Pine is still building. The Woodlands hasn't started. McKinsey Meadows isn't finished. Sunset Meadows hasn't started, and Saddlestone isn't finished. And I'm looking at these homes, and I've been to all of these developments. None of them have the density that this one does. And they all have a little bit of room. And this concerns me. And the traffic, when all these are completed, the traffic is going to be horrible. It's already bad. It's already projected to be worse in the future, up to 2040. So I'm just thinking, you know, what are we going to do? We don't have any way out of here. If there's a fire or a natural disaster, how are we going to get out? So that's my major concern. And if this development is going to go forward, I'd like to see it moved forward towards the street. You know, cut back on that green space and give us a little bit more room between that alley and our fence. Give us a little bit of a buffer. And ask the developer to put some trees in, because they're going to take out all those trees. And we need those trees to protect us, you know. We don't want to look at those homes. We've been looking at trees, and we hate to have to give that up. So I'm hoping that you can consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Marvin Inman.
Yes, my name is Marvin Inman. I live at 1654 West Aiken, and I'd like to discuss or bring up a few issues that from our last meeting. One of them is the density. I would like to suggest that they reduce the number of homes, if this thing is going to go through, reduce the number of homes, open up spaces, leave some of the, more of the existing trees throughout the development. Also, with this development, if it goes, we've got, and the lady previously mentioned, we have Hayden Homes, the elementary schools being developed. There's going to be Habitat Homes, the Woodlands is being developed, Sisters Industrial Park, future roundabout, Barclay revision, and Clear Pine. All that's being done pretty much around the same time in the next 1 to 3 years, probably 4 years. It's going to be a constant build, constant traffic congestion. I would like to find out if there is a way that the people of Sisters could request a moratorium on this project and any large projects until some of these other future developments get taken care of. Under the Oregon statute, I think 197.520 calls for public hearings. I don't know if the public can look into it or if the city council has any input on that, of creating a moratorium.
Well, the Planning Commission does not have the authority to do anything like that.
Well, it says city in the statute here. The city can do it. It's something to look into. I think if enough people of Sisters would request a moratorium on development for a future time. Because we're having, like I said, we're going to have a lot of stuff going on here in the next 1 to 3 years.
I'll direct that question to staff. Scott, can you elaborate on that?
Sure. It's my understanding from state law that there's some very tight restrictions on how moratoriums can be put into place. If there's one example that I'm familiar with is if there's an identified, lack of utilities, sewer, water to be able to serve a specific, like if there's a need to do upgrades before it can serve as a development, you can put a moratorium in place until those upgrades are put into place. But I'm not aware, and we can also ask our city attorney, of any situation where a moratorium can be put in place just due to the community concerns about the pace of growth. So Garrett, we have our city attorney on the line. Garrett, would you care to add anything to that?
Your summary is accurate, Scott. Yeah, there's only a handful of reasons why a moratorium could be enacted. And I guess probably more to the point, there's a process to go through a moratorium that's sort of outside the scope of this process. So while that could be taken up in a different proceeding, it's ultimately not going germane to this proceeding.
Even though the project hasn't been approved?
Correct. The planning commission certainly, and even the city council couldn't, on a whim or at least instantaneously impose a moratorium. There's a process for that hasn't even been started. So that's why it's a separate procedure that ultimately can't happen as part of this hearing that we're in right now.
Okay, now, didn't we have something in the nugget about this, the sewer systems having to or the treatment plant having to be redone because of the growth in Sisters?
I think what you're referring to is recent articles about the wastewater master plan. Those master plans take a look at they're kind of a 20-year outlook on growth.
Okay.
And so to accommodate the 20-year projections of population, there would need to be some improvements to our water and wastewater system. But to serve this particular development, we have capacity currently.
And that's including all the other developments that are in now with elementary school going out to the high school area?
That's correct. Yeah, when we do reviews of projects for traffic, we take a look into what projects have already been approved out there. And we do have a city engineer and a public works director that we refer all these applications to for comment when they come up to make sure that all of those facilities are indeed capable of handling the request.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
But since we have another meeting on the December 8th, staff can prepare kind of a more prepared response to your question about the moratorium.
Yeah, I still hold it. I think they should reduce the number of homes going in there by some. I don't know if that's something the city can require. There is a density allowance that these guys can build to, but you can say, well, instead of 70, we want 50 homes, opening up the space, or condense them in an area and then put more open land around so it doesn't look like a major metropolis. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Forgive me, folks, if I don't pronounce names correctly. I'm doing my best. Ann Marland?
Just to let you know, I am standing up. I'm Annie Marland. I live at 498 North Wheeler Loop within the Pines. I've been a citizen of Sisters for 22 years, and I've also lived in the Pines for 22 years. Even though we couldn't fight to get rid of Dollar General, the road that they put in from McKinney Butte back to the apartment buildings happens to be 10 feet from my fence. And now, of course, I hear boom boxes and everything. Anyway, my major concern is will that street continue through the new development so that people cut through that way to get to 242? And I don't know if anybody would know that, but that's what I'm really concerned about. Put some tax there or something. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just a note to staff, if we could determine what the feasibility of that is with respect to connection on that road for the next portion of the hearing, that'd be great. Thanks. John Sanders.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Sanders. I live at 578 West St. Helens Avenue in the neighborhood of Pine Meadow Village. Been a resident here of Sisters for 17 years. I am not in favor of the project as proposed, primarily for all the reasons already mentioned, as well as reasons that were mentioned in the previous hearing and things that I read in the nugget. I'm going to pose a few questions that I think are relative to this project, as well as other projects that are currently ongoing, for the committee to reflect on, as well as the city council to reflect on. I won't use the word moratorium. I would use the word timeout. Are we in need of a timeout with respect to these developments in the city of Sisters? Do we have the proper infrastructure, sewer, water, traffic considerations to support what we've already approved? Should a new neighborhood be developed if it will have negative effects on neighborhoods already in place? Why is there such a rush to develop every square foot in the UGB? Is it because we want to go to Salem and extend that UGB so we can do more of the same? Are we in danger of destroying what makes Sisters so desirable by overdevelopment? Lastly, is it time for the Planning Commission and City Council to reflect on these questions and do the right thing for the city of Sisters? Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Twelker.
Good evening. Paul Twelker, 1620 West Williamson Avenue in Sisters. My roots go back to 1971 in this town. I want to address two things having to do with safety and livability. And the first one is your garage rear setback that you have approved, or apparently will approve, for this master plan development. The standard is 20 feet. And yet it would appear that the proposal is for 18 feet. let me show you what that looks like. I took this picture this evening. That's a pickup truck on a driveway that has a setback of 20 feet. And look at where the front end is. It is so far into the sidewalk that any person would have to walk on the rolled curb to walk around it. And elderly people might have a hard time staying upright walking on that part of the pavement. The idea that you can drop 2 feet and then put it into a buffer is what I'm questioning. Now, why do I show a pickup truck? Because since COVID-19 lockdown, for the first time, there are more pickup trucks sold than passenger cars. And the average of the 5 most popular full-size and 5 most popular mid-size trucks range from about 17.5 feet to over 21 feet long. This includes all bed sizes and cab sizes. And the average pickup truck measures 19.8 feet. That's within 4 feet of your 20-foot setback. So that, even if you were able to park so close to the garage, you would still be on an 18-foot setback, sticking over 1.5 feet into the alleyway. And the public has been told that you've placed a great emphasis on that buffer zone. And I think that it would be worthy of our listening to your reasons why you have a trade-off between safety and the buffer zone. What, you know, that's a legitimate question that we could ask. Do you wish to respond?
Sure, I'll respond to that. The Planning Commission specifically did not have anything to do with determining how the application applied to the existing building code during the process. When it is brought to us in a hearing, that's the first time that we see it. And so now we are going through the process of understanding what this development is entailing and determining its feasibility as it applies to the building code as it currently is written and the development code as it is currently written. Not as it will be in the future, not how it was in the past, but as how it is right now. So staff goes through with the applicant and determines what is good, what is bad, what needs to change. Once it gets to a point where it's presentable, that's when it comes to us and we take a look at it. That's how the process works. So we're in the process right now of understanding the concerns of the public, taking those into consideration with respect to reviewing all of these different attributes, including the length of the driveways. And based on a lot of different factors, a decision will be made.
I appreciate your openness. The second thing, well, I want to make a recommendation that the 20-foot setback be retained. Secondly, I would ask that you would meet sometime to discuss this entire issue of setbacks in light of the current vehicular situation that we have, where many of the trucks, which many people drive around here, are longer than your driveways. Okay, second issue is on-street parking. It has to do with the row of townhomes that are at the bottom of your map up there, phases 3 and 4. The first 2 rows, with the top row and the second, the middle row, they all have access to on-street parking. And in fact, local street A has parking. I believe it's going to be on one side of the street only, although some of your documents indicate two sides, and I don't know how to handle that. But there will be no on-street parking for the alleyway between the first row and the second row. But that orphans that last row of townhomes. Where can visitors to those residents' homes park? They can't park in the alleyway unless they've arranged to park in a person's driveway. Many driveways are filled with cars overnight, as you know, because their garages are stuffed full of storage. In any event, people, at least in the center part of that first row, they can park on Brooks Camp, or they can park on local street A. That's quite a walk, up to 300 feet to go, especially at wintertime with snow. And we were provided with no indication of sidewalks or pathways that are paved on these particular plans. My concluding comment, cramming 3 rows of dwellings into Sunset Meadows involves trade-offs. Ignoring the impact of clear cutting of trees on neighboring subdivisions, disruption of wildlife corridors, minimizing of landscaping to soften the effects of the buildings, minimizing the intent of the Tree City USA designation of sisters, where you can allow clear cutting of almost the entire acreage except for the front and the side. Options, outdoor living options for the residents, like space for family gatherings and grilling and gardens, because the homes are going to take up almost the entire lot. And there's no backyard unless you want to count the driveway. The compromising of dark sky policies, which may happen because it is in the literature that you gave us that some of those policies will be compromised. These trade-offs jeopardize livability, and it jeopardizes the beauty of our community. And how people will look at a development like this in 20 years. Are they going to say that was enlightened planning or a failed experiment? Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Carmichael?
I have nothing to say. Everybody said what I was going to say.
Thank you. Diane Dell?
Good evening. I'm Diane Dell. I live at 268 North Wheeler Loop in Sisters. I just brought something to read. I started the Save Sisters campaign. I have been going to every neighborhood in this town in the last few weeks to talk about this new development plans with many of the residents, who are a very diverse group that make up the demographics of Sisters. There was one thing I noticed that we all had in common. We all love what Sisters is and the lifestyle we share here. The charm of the attractive small locally owned businesses that make the town district that caters to tourists makes our town a delightful, interesting, unique destination for so many, even from locally neighboring towns. I work in one of these stores and get to talk with all the tourists who come in, which is a majority of our business. They love the old 1800s Western style that is consistent throughout Sisters. It's a living museum. and one of the few places you can come to and see authentic Western handmade goods from local artists. Where else can you find that without weeding through the many chain stores that make up the majority of so many other places? That's precisely what makes Sisters so special. If you spoil that concept with this urban-style, dense, noisy development that doesn't look like the rustic, rural look, clogging up the area with traffic, the gateway to one of the most scenic mountain passes in the world, it would be an unfortunate eyesore right at one of the main spots in town. When you come around that corner and see the gorgeous, grand, unobtrusive view of the Cascades, you will remember that forever. Don't spoil that location, which is one of the most important tourist assets this town possesses. I would much rather see upscale homes nestled in the trees in that very beautiful spot. A phrase that I live by: don't try to be something that you're not. Be the best that you are. Please do the right thing. Nurture and support what this town is that makes it special. Don't try to make it something that it isn't. I think it would be important to safeguard and preserve the historical value of Sisters and its tourism, because without thoughtful development, this town could be ruined. Quiet living in nature was the concept of the original developers. So people could live peacefully, removed from traffic, noise, and population. Many people come here from all over the world to partake in all the wonderful outdoor recreational sports and relish in our unspoiled nature, something most do not have at home. Maintaining the balance between development and respecting that master plan of not becoming too busy is what is needed now before it is lost forever. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Stephanie Schoenleber.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Schoenleber. I live at 1014 East Horseback Trail. It's part of Saddlestone, which was, the last builder was Eric Olson. He built our home. And then the new builder, Woodhill, came in, made us promises that the homes would follow the covenants and restrictions and be livable in that space. The homes they built filled up the lots completely. The garages were insufficient for the vehicles, especially large trucks. So now we have parking on the street, which is against the covenants and restrictions. And now that Woodhill has 2 houses to complete, the new board of the association is faced with homeowners who don't have room to park their cars. If it snows, I have no idea where they're going to put those cars during snow removal. So I believe Woodhill did not consider the community they were building in when they made the plans for the lots, because the homes completely fill the lots and there is very little garage space for a 3 to 4 bedroom home. And those include townhomes that are 3 to 4 bedroom homes. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Sorry in advance. Teresa Collerer?
Good evening, Chair, Jeff Seymour, and Commissioners. I live at Trees Kohler, I live at 1190 Jansen Court in Sisters. I have many concerns relative to the proposed development facing Highway 242 between West Hood and North Brooks Camp Road called Sunset Meadows. Applicant Woodhill Homes. Here are my top 3. Open space within development. It would be more livable for all concerned if the development had a bigger buffer between it and the adjacent neighboring developments, and included paths or small open spaces within the heart of the houses and apartments, so residents would have a place to walk besides the street or the 242 facing space. 2, parking spaces for residents. Within the development, my perspective is that each unit needs to have at least one assigned parking spot. If I heard correctly at the last meeting, I believe that what is proposed for the apartments is one parking spot for every 2 apartments. Why is that? It seems reasonable and respectful of all who live either within or outside the development to the minimum have a 1-to-1 ratio between a rental unit and a parking space. Where will folks park if no parking space for their unit? On the streets? In front of their neighbors' homes who are fortunate enough to have a garage? To say nothing of the fact that most or many households have 2 cars. Traffic is number 3. This development, which if approved as it is currently configured, will bring 142 to 174 new residential units to Sisters, along with Sisters Woodlands on the other side of Highway 20 with 359 new residential units for a total of over 500 new units for Sisters. Population 3,270. A 15% increase just from these 2 developments alone will bring a huge increase to traffic going through Sisters at any given time. Plus the traffic increase to the daily inflow and outflow of day workers in the new commercial spaces being built in Sisters Woodlands, Sun Ranch, and elsewhere in town. Everyone is aware traffic is already challenging, especially during the summer months. At the October 20th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, I heard a report given about parks and Sisters. The upshot being that Sister is underparked. I'm talking about open space now, not parking spaces for cars. As currently proposed, Sunset Meadows is going to be showcasing a nice open space area facing 242, AKA Phase 3, visible from 242 and West Hood. Have you or your staff considered working with the owner and the developer to make this area actually a city-owned park and save a few more trees in that area and throughout the development, cut back on the number of units allowed, but still making sure to include some apartments and townhomes, and create a bigger buffer with the neighboring developments? In a perfect world, we'd first see Sisters Woodlands built out and most units sold, and all the impacts thereof, before considering something the size and scope of Sunset Meadows to be also developed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, is it possible just to clarify one thing about parking? Our parking requirements are not 1 space per 2 units. It's 2 spaces per 1 unit. So I just want to make sure that everybody understood that. So thank you. That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
So that's it for testimony for folks that signed up when they came in. Emmy, do we have anybody on Zoom that would like to testify?
I will check Zoom while
We'll
we.
get to
This is Carrie Meir.
1 second, let me pull up the participants list. I hear a Carrie Muir would like to speak.
I would actually like to defer my testimony to December 15th.
All right, so no public testimony at this time.
But I also, sorry?
I was just confirming that I understood what you're saying, so I'll stop speaking.
Oh, thank you. And then I couldn't get off mute in time to speak up at the beginning of the meeting, but the commissioner member who we excused, in the last meeting, it was said that that was not enough of a conflict that he lived in a woodland home, but yet today we said it was excused. Why would we have done that?
I'll take a crack at this, and Garrett, you can chime in as well. It was because of additional comments made that exhibited a strong bias to this project. So it was additional comments between then and now.
I don't have anything to add to that other than just that you made the comment that you want to defer your testimony, and since that is not a sure thing, since the Planning Commission elected to defer their decision on whether to continue the hearing, I would just suggest that you make your comments now. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Garrett, for mentioning that, but that is why I wanted to mention it, because over a week ago on your website, you posted that no one was coming from the developers. And so I know personally, we didn't drive back to Sisters. We stayed on the coast because we knew it was going to be deferred. I know dozens of other people that did not show up today, knowing that the developer wasn't bothering up and that are planning to speak on December 15th. So I do think it would be very wrong to not open it up for open opinion on December 15th. Is that something that we can discuss now? Or again, it was posted on the website that it would be continued on December 15th. If we're stopping all of the testimony today, that is a disservice to the people that read on the website that it's continuing December 15th.
And that's not the that is not the motion under consideration or the staff recommendation. I think what was being suggested is just that was a staff recommendation, an applicant recommendation. The Planning Commission still has to make their ruling. I think the comment was just make your public comment just on the outside chance that the Planning Commission went in a different direction. But I think that's what the city attorney was referring to. Is that correct, Garrett?
It is.
Did you understand that, Ms. Meyer? No.
Again, I would prefer to defer my statement, and if this is the last chance I have, then I will speak up. But if I have time, I would rather save people's time and energy and do it on December 15th.
Let's go ahead and, is there anybody else on Zoom?
There are a few other people over Zoom that I would like to check in and give an opportunity for public testimony.
Okay. Miss, allow us to continue with the public testimony, and then we will convene as a commission and have a discussion. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the next name I see on Zoom is Jan Martin. Would you like to provide public testimony tonight?
No testimony, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. The next individual is Eric Strobel. Would you like to provide public testimony tonight?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The next name I see is Jude. Would you like to provide public testimony tonight? I no longer see Jude. And I think that is everyone.
Thank you, Emmy. Sir, remind me of your name again?
Bob Temple.
Bob Temple. I don't have you here, but that doesn't mean anything. So come. Okay, that's no problem. It's no problem. Mr. Temple, why don't you come on up and share with us what you want to say?
Just a quick few thoughts about the whole process.
Before you share your thoughts, if you could give me your name and your address for the record.
Robert Temple, 1660 West Williamson, west in the town here.
Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunity. I really like this town. It's been a great town. But unlike many people here tonight, I came from down under, Southern California. And I have no regrets for leaving. I've gone back a couple times and it's horrible down there. I love it here. It's great. And we have, okay, maybe some don't want to hear it, but we've been here, we moved over from the valley, moving up to Southern California, over to the valley area, and I work there. And then have gone into home inspections and a building inspector. So I've been a city, county, and a state building inspector. We came over here because we like the area, we like the people. So we came over here and we bought half a city block. Sounds overwhelming, a half a city block, doesn't it, Jack? We were neighbors back then. And across the street from the property we bought, it was your house. And then there's a little house on the corner. And I think you hung your deer there to age, didn't you, before it was butchered?
I don't remember.
Okay. That's the story I was told several times. But anyway, and then I had on a skinning shed by him for some prior owner. And we liked the area. We liked the people. We enjoyed it. And I've got because of the time factor, I can't do this, but I have, whoever might be interested, it's an article written by Gary T. Walt. We all know Gary. He's an interesting guy, quite a writer. And I read this 11 years ago. I thought, who wrote this? And it was Gary T. Walt, and I couldn't believe it. It's great. Anyway, bottom line, he says, you people need to ground yourselves solidly and correctly in the community before acting on issues to be sure and get to know the great people we have. That's a good consideration, I think. Then, hopefully with a different perspective, try to serve yourselves, the community, and our families with a different enthusiasm than we have to date. Well, when we say we have to date, he was talking about his group of friends. And I talked to Gary just the other day and had a good talk with him. And he's a grand old man. He really is a good guy. And so finally, after talking with him, I said, Gary, how old are you? He says, I'm 77. I just froze. I'm 78. Yeah, I'm an old man. Anyway, I'm going to shut up and sit down here. But the point is, what he was trying to say, and I've got copies of this if you'd like, simply get to know the people, know our interest, what we want to do, and go together united and with a good spirit of compromise. This is a great area here. And I live at the far end, the west end of the town now, and it's a nice, except for 5:30 in the morning, one of the truckers comes in, he's got a Jake brake. And he tries to make sure it's working when he comes through that town. Anyway, it's love here. It's great to be able to talk and speak and share our opinions and then come back and say, I'm not sure about you, but what you said, I'm just pointing you to illustrate, not picking on you, but to be able to listen to what other people are saying and then say, I didn't think it about this way. The high density is what I'm object to. Having been a building inspector up in the suburbs of Portland, Salem, and my favorite town, not Klamath Falls, no, Pendleton. They got a great community spirit. And we have had one here, but I'm thinking with some of the ideas coming in here, it's not going to be, maybe it might not be the same. But I would hope that it would be, that we would share each other's opinions and thoughts and then work together and come to a compromise and go forward, because it's a great area here. And I love it, and I have no regrets for leaving Southern California 53 years ago.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak that wasn't signed up? Sir, come on up.
I'm Dwayne Dippin. I'm at 607 South Cottonwood. And I just wanted to talk about what everybody's been talking about, the special neighborliness that we have here in Sisters. And where I came from, could you put the diagram back up? Where I came from before moving here, I was in a 9-house cul-de-sac. And everybody had a garage and everybody had a driveway. But I had one neighbor that had a boat in his garage and 5 cars. So there was no parking in the cul-de-sac for anybody's guests or anybody else. So I look at the diagram and I look at the numbers that you were doing, and I thought there was a good job done earlier talking about the driveways. 2 things concern me from my background of having a neighbor that kind of took up a lot of space is the street on which the townhouses will park on. You've reduced the lots, or they propose to reduce the lots down to 30 feet. Well, my Subaru Forester is about 16 feet long. So you only get 1 car in front of a house. Kind of tough to fit 2 cars per house on that street. It might be tough to have a birthday party with 6 or 10 cars come to try to park on that street. Because a lot of people aren't parking in their garages anymore, either because the truck doesn't fit in it or they've filled it up with other things. The second point I would make is the houses on the bottom line, these individual homes. As I understand it, they're putting their garage off the alley, and that's great. But where do their guests park? On 242 and walk across the common area? Where else can they park if they're visiting? They can't park in the alley. And then finally, I may misunderstand the concept of the 72 to 124 apartments. And we do need more apartments, but I don't see what you're judging the design and layout of the apartments in that diagram. I'm glad to hear that you get 2 cars per apartment, because most people that have two adults have 2 cars. So anyway, it's hard for me to say, yeah, let's go with the apartments, because I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's any green space in that spot either. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could just clarify one more thing. I think it would be helpful for the crowd. It was good points that the gentleman just raised about the apartments. All that's being requested right now is just master plan approval. They would have to come in later for site plan review approval through the city, and then at that point they would show their layout and their design and their parks and open space. So I just wanted to clarify that as well.
James and Dana Cunningham.
We don't have any comment, thanks.
Thank you. Mark Mew.
Thank you. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Mark Mew, last name M-E-W. I live at 1600 West Carson Avenue here in Sisters. Thank you very much. I didn't plan on speaking when I first came tonight, and I'm not going to actually talk about the subdivision itself because my mind is I'm still learning. But something came up about the procedures tonight that I felt I wanted to ask you. And that is, when we came in, we were told that first the developer was going to make some presentation. Then we, the public, would have an opportunity to comment. Then the developer would have an opportunity for rebuttal. He's not here, and it appears the commission is poised to continue this later. But now I'm hearing that perhaps public testimony won't be continued till later. Well, we don't know what the developer is going to say. So it seems to me that he gets the whole show at the next meeting, and the public, if you close testimony tonight, we can't respond to what he says, which was supposed to be part of the process, at least that I understood. So anyway, All I wanted to say was that if you continue it tonight, I hope you will continue public testimony as well, so that we have a chance to hear the developer and respond to him before he has the final word. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sharon Skidmore.
I'm Sharon Skidmore, 1109 North Forest Edge. And I agree with a lot of the testimony tonight. I have significant concerns regarding Tree City, open space. Looking at this map here, it looks like most of their green space is on 242, if I'm reading that right. Is that correct? And who's going to let their dog chase a ball or their kid go play right next to the highway? And so if that's the open space, that doesn't look like it's really usable space except for as a sidewalk and walking your dog and looking a little prettier maybe from the road. I'm concerned about the density regarding all of the utilities, water, sewer. I'm worried about the number of kids. Are our schools prepared for the number of kids with all of the development and all of the areas that we're putting in? It's really awesome to see more younger families coming in. And so are we ready to take that from the whole community side? I'm worried about traffic going through town because we don't have this many jobs in Sisters. There are a lot of people working from home, but if a lot of these people are working in Bend and Redmond, they have to go through town. So that's going to significantly increase the traffic along with the other developments that are on that side of town. I'm worried about the trees. Clear cutting is another, where's the green? Where's the open space? There's not even really landscaping that makes it look like Sisters, like an outdoor place. So those are probably my biggest concerns, but most everyone who has concerns about this development, it seems to not be in line with what Sisters is and what people want Sisters to be, and myself included. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak tonight? Sir?
My name's Lauren Melbrick. I live at over here in 1962 East Timber Pine Drive. I spoke last meeting. I wasn't going to speak tonight either. I was just sitting back and listening to what other people are saying. And the consensus I feel is that most people would not like to see that come into Sisters. It's just not what Sisters is about. I think that if we feel like we're being force-fed, it's like the developers are in control, and we're just trying here to appease the developer. Well, we'll ask them to tweak this, we'll tweak that. It's like we're afraid to say no because we're going to lose something. Well, we're not going to lose anything. What we're going to lose is Sisters. So I want everyone to think about not just the 426 trees they're going to cut down. Think about that number, 426 trees. That's a lot of life that's going to get cut down. We're in a crossroads of Sisters right now. We're going to go one or two ways. And the one way I really feel strongly that 10, 15 years down the road, we're going to look back and say, man, what happened to our town? I saw it happen in Happy Valley back in Portland. Beautiful area. That valley is ruined forever. It's a memory. I hate to see Sisters become a memory because Sisters has an identity, it has a personality, and I tell you, when you let that go, you're just another town. There's nothing special about you anymore. People aren't going to want to come here anymore because they say you can't drive through it. Where are all these people going to get a doctor? You guys try to get a primary physician around here lately? I mean, come on. It's almost impossible to get a doctor. I had to wait 6 months to get a doctor's appointment. I don't know about you guys, but that's just going to make it worse. The livability is just going to go down. So I hate to think that we're not in charge of our town, respectfully. Not the developers, us. We own the town, not Will Hill Homes, okay? Not the developers. Us as citizens, we have a lot of power if we unite. That's, you know, it's our vision. No disrespect intended. You gentlemen are in an elected position, correct?
No, we're appointed, and we're volunteers.
Okay, but you have as much to lose as we do, right? It's our decision along with you guys. I hope it's not just you guys making the decision for Sisters. I hope you really take in what the people here, and I do think this is probably a fairly representative group of people of the town. Most people don't ever want to say anything, but they think it, that you really take this to heart, that you hear what these people are saying, that they really want to keep Sisters small, unique, and that's not a bad thing. I think in our minds, that's what makes Sisters great. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up, sir.
Bill Carmichael. I live at 1610 West Williamson Avenue here in Sisters. I've lived in the area for 43 years. When I came here, there was 813 people was the population in Sisters. My concern or my question is in reflecting what I've heard so much here tonight. I don't believe that, even though this is a, you know, in my opinion and many other people's opinion, is a terrible proposal just because it's so crammed in. But I think the reaction that we're hearing, that's a visceral reaction, is that this is not the first rodeo that Sisters has decided to do, whether it's the one over, I forget the name of the one that was supposed to be for Laird Foods and all the 500 people they were going to bring in, which isn't happening now. A lot of the developments in the recent past have been under the name of affordable housing, which is not happening, even in my neighborhood where they made the streets narrower so they're private streets, and we have to maintain them in the name of cramming more in and affordable housing. We've seen this happen with the apartments that are being built, with these developments that are coming in over and over and over again. And it's like the DNA of Sisters, which so many people have talked about, which is the mountains and the rivers and all the things that bring people here, put the pressure, I guess, on the Planning Commission and the sister city, along with what Salem brings out as what we're supposed to do with land use and other things. And it seems to me that we are just giving up what Sisters is so wonderful. And I know there's a lot more people who want to live here. This is not going to stop. But if we just keep cramming people into little spots like that with so many of those, and we build these apartments and we keep saying, well, we got to have more housing for these people. I don't understand why we can't say Sisters is landlocked. It has EFU on one side and has the forest on the other side, and we can only do so much. And then if we start getting more land because the UGB gives us more, it's all just going to be the same thing, where we're just going to, what people have already said, we're going to destroy the ambience of what's here. The DNA of Sisters, Oregon is these mountains and these rivers and the trees and the beautiful things that we have. If we destroy that, we destroy everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience that would like to speak? Miss?
Nadine Sims, 150 West Heising Drive. I had absolutely no intention of talking tonight, but my blood is just like roiling. Anybody could have drawn that. That is like the least creative, unimaginative neighborhood you could put up there. And I have moved to Clear Pine from Bend because Bend got destroyed. I don't want to see it happen here. And at least Clear Pine, a new neighborhood, it really planned for community and for neighbors to know their neighbors. It has a common area, it has a bocce ball court. It had things to create community, and it feels like that. What happens though in the one area where when there's not enough parking, then you don't feel so good about your neighbors. When there's no place to meet your neighbor in a community area or to experience nature, you don't feel like you're in a community. And I just think that's just a really poor excuse for tearing down 400 plus trees.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak tonight?
Could I ask a question?
Sure. Come on up, and we got to do it the legal way here. You got to state your name and address for the record.
Here, Marvin Inman, 1654 West Aiken. Last meeting, we talked about phase 5. I kind of got the feeling from what was said tonight that there's no plan at all for that piece of property. And my comment last time was, we've got to hold the developer to the fire to have something. If this is going to go through and if they can reduce the number of homes, if that apartment complex doesn't have a design and they intend, I think somebody made a comment, they want to leave it open for them to sell. Well, my thinking is they're going to develop the homes and they're going to sell that property. And then something else is going to have to go through the city to get it developed. I think if anything, reduce the number of homes, hold them to the fire to have a design that it's approved at the same time. Hayden Homes did this with their developments. They left the apartments to last in the village of Cold Springs. But on the other one, by the high school, they ended up building the apartments and they haven't finished the homes yet, which was, I think, better. If you're going to put apartments in there, have them commit to it. And like I said, have a construction bond that they have to do something with that land. And I have a feeling they're just going to, with the economy the way it's going to go, they're going to build and they're going to sell that land to someone else to develop it. And I think that needs to be taken in consideration and not let them sell the homes to make money and then get out and not do the apartments, because an HOA, they don't manage apartments. It's a separate entity. That will be an HOA and the apartments won't be. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else from the audience like to speak tonight? Going once, going twice. Okay. I want to thank everybody for your comments tonight. It's really fantastic to see the community so engaged and passionate, and I commend all of you. Thank you. So, I think at this point, commissioners, it would be prudent to revisit our procedural responsibilities.
So, Mr. Muse, can we discuss a little bit?
Speak in your microphone so everybody can.
Okay.
We can discuss to the degree that it's procedural. We're not going to discuss deliberations or have a robust conversation. That's just, we just got to follow the protocol.
So I was interested in, I think it was Mr. Mue's comment about being able to respond to the developer's presentation, and that was a point that I thought was pretty interesting that couldn't happen tonight. Is that accurate in terms of if we close public testimony now, then the public wouldn't have an opportunity to respond?
If we were to,
Why are we having a meeting when the damn developer's not even here? I'm not going to find fault. Well, not really.
that's an excellent question, and the meeting was scheduled, and whether the applicant decides to show up is on their accord. So,
So we close it, they wouldn't be able to, the developer wouldn't be able to talk either, right? He'd be
so
done.
let's keep things in perspective here. The applicant has requested a continuance. We're obligated to continue it as a
We
result
are,
of the
what
request.
if we refuse?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to jump in here. So you guys are obligated at a minimum to leave the written record open. And if you do that, there is going to be an opportunity at a minimum for everyone to say something in an open period and for an opportunity for response to what was said during that initial period and then final applicant legal argument. Or you could decide to continue the hearing and allow for oral testimony at a date and time certain, which was the initial recommendation. So at a minimum, there's going to be more time to say something. The question is, do you want it to hear it in person or do you want to hear it in writing? But the applicant is not going to have its own special session at the next meeting unless you grant everybody the right to speak.
In person.
Does that clear things up, guys? Okay. And I think the reason that we wanted to bring this continuance and make a motion initially was to give the public a peace of mind, knowing that it was going to remain open to some degree.
Well, I think we should leave it open for public testimony too. I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Okay, should we go ahead and make a motion?
I move that we keep the hearing open for public testimony. That's probably not the proper way to present that.
We need a date.
Yeah, any motion to continue the oral and written record as it was today needs to be specific to a date, time, and location.
Do you guys want me to just go ahead and read it? And then we can discuss it? Okay.
Legalese.
I move to continue the public hearing for City Files MP 22-01, Sub 22-01, and MNR 22-02 to 5:30 p.m. on December 8th, 2022 at City Hall. Additionally, leaving the public hearing open to both oral and written testimony.
I second that.
Garrett, is that sufficient language?
It is.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. This will be continued on the date specified, and it will go very similar to like what we had tonight. With luck, the applicant will be here, and we will be able to ask questions, and we will proceed from there. At this point,
Apologies, on the Zoom, we couldn't hear the date that you said.
sure.
Did you say December 15th, the date that the developer wanted?
It's 5:30 p.m., December 8th, 2022, here at City Hall.
Is it correct, though, that the developer asked for December 15th?
I don't know. I can't answer that. This is the date that we've decided on. I'm going to turn it over to staff for additional comments Feedback, questions, anything?
I just acknowledge that the written record during this intervening time period between tonight and December 8th remains open, so any additional testimony can be submitted to my attention either by mail or email. I have my cards, I'll put them at the back to provide that contact information. Just please be specific to the project, referencing either the name, Sunset Meadows, and the file numbers.
Okay. With that, we're going to adjourn the hearing for this evening and continue on the 8th. Thanks, everybody.